You know, when I first came up with the idea to do this project, of course I wasn't thinking about a title right from the start, but the time came that I finally needed to think about a title, and I chose to entitle the project The Missing Anchor. And I did that because I kind of use that as a metaphor for fathers that are missing in the home. If you know anything about ships, you know that when a ship is out at sea and it needs to stop, it drops an anchor. That anchor provides stability and keeps the ship from moving too far, you know, one direction or the other. It's the same thing with fathers. You know, when a father is missing in the family or in the life of their child, that anchor, that support, that stability, it's not there. So a lot of times you'll see the result of a missing father play out in the life of his children. So when we put this project together, my whole goal was to, if I could help one father to get back on track in the life of their child, I felt that this project would be a success. Now, my hope is that many fathers see this project, whether they're in their children's life or not, that many fathers will see this project and they will be able to get some type of information from it to help them be a better dad. For my own selfish reasons, I'm hoping to do that for myself. You know, I was hoping that this project would also help me, you know, because I don't have all the answers. You know, I could sit up here and say, you know, well, I'm gonna teach my son X, Y, and Z, and I will, but I also know that if I can get with other dads and, you know, and kind of pick their brains on a couple of different subjects here and a couple of different subjects here, that it will kind of increase my knowledge base and I could be a better father to my own children. So that's why we did this project, in hopes that it will kind of spark something in the life of a father to make him get back in place and do what he needs to do in his child's life. Because we're raising the next generation, and it's important for them to have that start they need to have at home.
Definition of a father is someone able to provide, care for, nurture, direct another person's life. It doesn't even have to be biological per se. I mean, because you can have someone fill that role and not necessarily be a natural or, you know, biological father. But that role itself, whenever somebody asks me about father or husband or something like that, for me personally in my life, I always think about God's role with us. So I think about how what God is like to me, and use that to challenge myself to be a father to either my children, or, it may sound funny, but even my wife. I mean, because that's whether you're head of a household, with respect to children, or a wife, that father role still comes into play.
A father to me is a positive influence in your life. You know, kids today, a lot of them, and I see it growing up, parents are friends. And yeah, I want to be a friend to my children, but first and foremost, you got to be a good example and a good role model. And sometimes that's not being a good friend, and I truly believe in that, because you have to offer that guidance to kids, right? God trusts you with these gifts, these children, and it's our job as men to be a good role model in their life, to show them how to treat other people, how to treat themselves, believe in who they are. It's a challenge growing up, especially in middle school. I wouldn't go back to middle school for all the tea in China. And I see how my son struggles with things, and just being present and being that good role model, being a good listener and setting a good example has made a world of difference. I could see the character in him. And you don't always see it at home, but what's so rewarding is when you talk to their teachers or you talk to their coaches, and you hear the positive things that they say about the character of that person, it just really lets you know that you're doing a good job. And my dad was there for me. You know, my dad passed when I was 13, but he was such a strong influence and laid such a good foundation that I still hear his words to this day in my head, and he guides me every day on the path to being a good example and to live up to his expectations and to be a good role model like he was to me.
My job as a dad is really to kind of figure out where my kids are going, what it is their purpose is, and then do everything within my power to prepare them to fulfill whatever purpose that is. So as a dad, you know, my boys are now, I got twin boys, they're 4, you know. I'm still figuring out or still learning or seeking direction about what that is for my 2 sons.
A dad to me means anything that I have to do to make sure that my kids succeed. So if it means being warrior, if it means being nurse, if it means being teacher, whatever it takes. So I guess I want to define it, but I don't want to limit myself because
Right.
whatever I need to do to make sure that, as Lorenzo said, that my children succeed, that they can fulfill the purpose that they have in this life, and that they can be good at whatever it is that their chosen fields are. I need to do what I have to do in order to ensure that they can be successful by giving them an example, so that in turn they can do the same thing for their sons or daughters as they grow and marry and have kids of their own.
I would say a father is one who provides, is the leader of their household, will go the extra mile for their family, make things happen, is the protector, the provider, the sustainer, the one that basically makes it happen, to be that living example of integrity and ethical character for their children.
Provides love, guidance, is there for everything. Dependable. There's an adjective is very strong in synopsis being a father in my mind.
One thing that I always think about as far as a father that a lot of people leave out, and they probably push it over to the maternal or the motherly side, is the nurturing part. Because if we think about it, well, in my life, I'll speak for myself, God to me has been a nurturer. So that's one of the things that I try to make sure I do with my children, is be that nurturer. So I don't leave it up to my wife to give out all the hugs and kisses. You know, I try to do that I try to do that myself as a father to my children. So it's not just about, you know, I have a son and a daughter, so it's not just about me telling my son, you know, how to be a man or how to be tough or how to catch a ball or something like that. But it's also about how to show love to other people. So, you know, that's really a big part. You know, I think our society places a lot on being tough and that's what they call being manly. But showing a man or showing somebody else how to love somebody else, I think, also plays in the part of being a father, being a teacher, being a role model. So that plays into being a father, in my opinion.
Being a father is a huge responsibility, and you have to be kind of almost like walking on eggshells sometimes with your kids, because you have to understand that they are a sponge and you're like the water. You just pour stuff out and they're just going to soak it in. And I've seen all kinds of examples. My kids will do certain funny things. One funny thing is sometimes I'll let a bad word slip, okay? And then little Jack, who's 3 years old, he says the same thing 2 days later. Said, "Oh my goodness." My wife looks at me, "What? Where did he hear that?" "I don't know." I scratch my head.
It was just a whole totally different thing. For me, for example, me and one of my sisters, the family had split up because my mother and my father had divorced when I was born. So I was born in 55. So that was a long time ago when they were split. But in the midst of the split, I lived in New York with one of my father's sisters, one of my aunts. And that was a terrible experience. But we used to come to D.C. with my mother during holidays, Thanksgiving, Christmas, things like that. But I always knew I had to go back to New York because my mother financially wasn't in shape to take care of all five. It was five of us. So she wasn't in no position to, handle all the kids in a little one-bedroom apartment at that time where she was living. So, and my father still really wasn't in the picture. We were just coming back to D.C., going back, coming back, going back, coming back. And that went on for years. And I believe I finally moved with my mother when I was about maybe 8 or 9. And I the gentleman that I met as my father when I was young at that age, I mean, it was nothing. It was no vibe. It was nothing. It was just, I didn't feel anything. You know what I mean? It wasn't like, he would come and get us and take us out or do anything. It was just, I don't even know why he was coming around. Maybe, I don't know if they had child support back then, but he was coming around, but I didn't really, it wasn't no bond or anything there. But as I got older, I guess 12, 13, 14, 15, I started understanding, well, this is your father. I started understanding things a little better. But we still didn't have a father and son relationship, knowing the old school whippings or I'm coming to the PTA meeting or you're playing ball, none of that. Got none of that. My father was in the street. So I came from that cloth for the jeans, the pants that he wore, those the pants I wore. So when I really, really, really got acquainted with my father, I guess about, 14, 15, 16-ish, and again, he was a street guy. He gave me, I think, like about $500 cash and a pound of marijuana. And that's, our relationship escalated then. It went to another level. It really did. It went to a more, that's my boy, but I know that's my father. You know what I mean? And but we still didn't deal with each other a whole lot. That was just his introduction to me for real. And then he finally moved to D.C. because he was living in New York. So he finally moved to D.C. and established some cleanesses and things like that. But by this time now, I'm already a corrupted little guy. I'm already doing things that, the day that I see these young cats doing that, I wish I could help them. I'm doing the best I can with that now, you know what I mean? But I know I set a trend and a path with a lot of young guys today thinking that was hip and slick and cool. That was, back then, that was being cool, you know what I mean? But, if I had anything to do over again, it'd be a lot I would do over. I'm not going to sit there and say, oh, no, I wouldn't do nothing. No, because I know more now, of course, you know what I mean? But as far as the father figure, I didn't have a father figure. My mom was the father and the mother. And I watched my mother struggle for so long. She struggled a long time. And, but as far as my dad, man, But I love him now. I go visit him. He's old, late 80s, probably about 90. He's still living, grace and mercy. You know what I mean? And, I do the best I can with him now. You know what I mean? We'll go visit. He's down in Columbia, North Carolina, but he's down in Columbia. You know what I mean? So, but that was my relationship with my father.
My father, he was present in my life, but he wasn't a constant presence in my life. So he would be at the house probably, I'd say, half of the month at times. But growing up with him while he was there, I would observe like the small things with him. Like, for example, he never taught me how to shave, but by watching him shave, I learned how to shave. So I noticed that even now I do some of the same things that he did when I was a child, when I didn't have any facial hair. So he, like I said, he was present, but he wasn't present. But like, I learned from his actions as well on what to do and what not to do. Like, for example, he had his first child at 15. So when I turned 16 years old and I didn't have a child, I felt like that was an accomplishment because I didn't want to follow that path that he took in life.
It was really non-existent. My father was in and out of my life. He really wasn't around. He was more focused on other women and doing what he wanted to do and be selfish than to impart in my life and be the father he should be.
I know if I had my dad around the way he should have been around, you know what I mean, I know I'd be a better man today. Like I'm trying to catch up now. You know what I'm saying? I'm trying to catch him in all areas of life, man. You know what I mean? As a result of not having that father or even a proper father figure. You know what I mean? And, you know, so that's kind of like where I'm at with the father thing, man. You know what I mean? I don't hate him or nothing like that. Love him dearly. You know what I mean? Because I've been taught to do that, though. In the beginning, like I said, he was just a guy in the street. My dad was known in the street as little so-and-so's son, and that's how we did it. You know what I mean? Seriously, and that's how it was, you know?
I grew up with my dad, so he's always been there. I've always seen him work hard. I've always seen him impart wisdom, you know, to me and my sister, my mom. So growing up, he was, you know, he was always there. He wasn't a sportsman. So, you know, I didn't grow up watching football and all that kind of stuff and equate that to my dad. So the things that I equate to my dad are his work ethic, and him, you know, telling me things like, you know, you can do whatever you put your mind to, encouraging me in the things that I was doing. You know, growing up in school, I did pretty well in school. So that was the expectation. And he made sure I lived up to that expectation and made sure that if I didn't, that there were clear consequences for not doing that. So he laid boundaries. He laid a framework for my own, you know, work ethic. So, you know, it's so funny because I learned later on that, you know, maybe he didn't do as well in school as I did, but I didn't know that at the time. But the fact that he held me to that standard because he saw what I could do, I think that spoke really well for him. You know, like later on, looking back on it, I think that spoke really well for him, and he didn't let me, fall into, maybe not doing so well in school just because maybe he hadn't. But so that's the thing I remember, him holding me to a standard, and I think that's really important for children because it's like a lot of times they get to do whatever it is that they want to do with no clear consequences. But like I said, in my household, there was always a consequence for not doing the things that you were supposed to do. And I think that's important more than anything else. The hugs, kisses, gifts, toys, all that stuff is great. But for there to be clear consequences with respect to the rules of the house, whatever they may be, is important as well. So laying that groundwork and that framework is definitely one of the things that I remember of him, in like grade school years.
My relationship with my dad, I would say one word, strained. Growing up, I was the firstborn. I was their first kid. They never done this before. So they came here from the Philippines fresh off the boat, if you will. Okay, they wanted a better life for their child, me. So they had expectations. So the challenge for me was living to these high expectations, and it was always a challenge and kind of difficult for me growing up. But from them, I learned a lot of respect for my dad. I learned to respect, the education and that he got to help provide for my mom and my brother and my sisters, and he had a great career. He was able to provide for us. For that, I respect him and love him dearly for really pulling through and going through the big culture change here and making a really good, solid life for myself and my mom and my brothers and sisters. So it's a good relationship now that we're both grown up. Now that we're both fathers, we totally get each other more so.
The interesting thing about fatherhood is that it changes your perspective. For years I've had, years prior to having children of my own, I knew fathers and they would tell me, man, when you have a child, this is going to change, that's going to change, and I didn't want to believe it. But it does happen. But it's not a bad thing. If you really want to be there in the life of your child and be there like you're supposed to, your perspectives on things will change because you're not living life for yourself anymore. You have a greater purpose. And as an example, I remember when I was 16 years old, I wanted a motorcycle. I didn't get a motorcycle till I was 30 years old. So I already felt like I was behind the clock. So I was really passionate about it. I got into a great motorcycle club. We traveled and did track days up and down the East Coast. We went to Canada. I was just really, really passionate about it. I was really into the sport. And, you know, I'd already met Kelly. We had gotten married. She was pregnant. My son was born. And I never forget, one day we went to New Jersey for a track day. He was about 6 or 7 months old. Did my ritual, you know, got my leathers on, you know, said, you know, told her, see you later. Probably kissed, played with my son, got on the bike and went out. Well, during this particular session, it was probably around lunchtime. Everything was normal. We're coming through the final turn to get on the straightaway. Got on the straightaway, probably got up to about, I don't know, about 150, 160 miles an hour. And I'm lining up to go into like a 45 mile an hour or 50 mile an hour right-hand turn. And I'm lined up, and as I go to throw the bike into the turn, I kind of glance down and I see another rider coming up, making a hard pass on the inside, to the point where I had to straighten my bike back up, gather myself, and go back down to complete the turn. Now, normally what would happen, as soon as I was able to, I would get back on the throttle and try to chase the guy down, you know, because it's a competitive sport. But this one particular time, as soon as I went to get on the throttle, I just heard, "What are you doing? It's not that important." And this is the first time this has ever happened to me while riding a motorcycle, especially in that environment. You can't have your mind, you know, thinking about what you're going to do next week or whatever. You got to be very focused. So it kind of, I knew I had been thinking about, you know, my son while I was riding. I knew that really wasn't safe. But when this thing happened, when I didn't feel the need to do this, to go chase that guy down, I didn't even finish another lap. We came back around, I got in the pit, I put my bike up on the bike stand and never rode it again. Something that my family and friends have been trying to get me to do for years. I didn't want to listen. My son, who couldn't even talk yet, just his presence alone and knowing what I wanted to be for him in his life got me to make that decision. Now that might seem small to some people, but those are the decisions that I think as fathers that we have to make. Being a father is sacrificial sometimes. You have to give up some of the things that you like in order for the greater good. But I think just the rewards in doing that are just incredible. And it's something that I'm definitely willing to do for my children.
Completely changed everything. I mean, from second one of when the realization hit that, you know, wow, I'm a father, put everything else in second place. Made perspectives and dreams of the future completely get rearranged and reprioritized to make me think in a totally different paradigm of what I should be doing and what I wanted to be doing. You know, things that, you know, say, you know, once you become a man, you put childish things away. That came to reality the day one of being a father, second one of being a father.
The way I look at life now with kids is I think twice. I look at the consequences before I make a decision now, because I have more to live for than just myself. I'm not reckless anymore. So my decision making is critical because it not only affects me, but it affects my loved ones and my family. And being a father, I have to keep that in mind because it's not about me anymore when I have little ones.
Because our son is due on August 1st of this year, and we had a miscarriage on August 1st of last year. So it was a pretty rough time going through the miscarriage and the process of getting back. Me personally, because I lost both of my parents. My father died of a heart attack when I was 15, and my mother was murdered when I was 17. So dealing with loss on that level was great, and then to lose a child, that kind of affected me.
Watching the kids grow and develop is bittersweet. While you're there when they're tiny and you cherish every stage of their growth, it's bittersweet as they grow up. My son is now 6'2". He's an amazing young man. My daughter's a beautiful young girl. She's matured. She has her gifts. He has her gifts. In some respects, it's like watching your heart run around outside your body because you just want to protect it, but you also have to realize you have to let them make their own mistakes. And it also becomes bittersweet because they do pull away, and they're supposed to. They're supposed to grow up, and if you do your job right, they're supposed to go off on their own and be independent. But I know I'm going to miss that when they're gone. Not that they're really gone, but they're on their own. They have their own life. They go and live and follow and pursue their own dreams and careers. And that's where it's a little bit bitter. But I know we've forged this great relationship and great bond, and I could never imagine any point in my life where we would not be close.
Our son is due like 1 year to the day after the miscarriage. So my anticipation level is through the roof, because once we found out we were having a boy, I was just like, wow, I get to cultivate, lead, and guide a man. And it's just like awesome to me that I'll actually be there in his life, an ever present force in his life to lead him and guide him and cultivate him in the things that God created him for.
Role of a father is very important. It's the most important. I'm not, and I'm a little biased because of being a man. The mother is someone my wife would say, and women would say that they're the most important. But I think they're the pillar of society. Without fathers, you don't get some of the moral standards that you really need. A true father is not just someone who's having a child, because anyone can have a child, as you well know, but someone who's truly being a father, based on some of those definitions I said before, those are lasting, where you get that character building within children that will carry on into the next generation. Without that, you have no backstop, and you fall into chaos. And we're seeing some of that right now with a lot of families that don't have fathers in the home.
Today's society, it's a very interesting and complex one right now, I believe. And with so many broken families these days, I would say that the role of mother is very important, but the role of father seems to be even more so important. I know a lot of families and children who grew up with absent fathers, and the repercussions from that can be pretty tremendous, and I've seen some of the damage, emotional damage especially. Being the father's role in today's society, is really to be a leader in a sense, someone to teach the right from wrong, and to take responsibility for their own actions as a father, and to hopefully teach that by example to children, that they need to be responsible for their actions as well, just like their father was. And that fathers need to learn from their own mistakes and teach their kids the same thing. And also to have fun and a connection with their kids, to be a part of their children's lives. Especially in today's society, I think fathers are starting to get it. I'm seeing a little bit more, I hope. I know maybe just a few years ago it didn't seem to be that way, but I'm starting to see more and more fathers actually take more active roles into their children's lives, and I think that just has a lot to do with societal changes. More mothers are working, more mothers are making more money, more of the breadwinner role. There's starting to be more fathers that stay at home, not as many, but I'm starting to see that from time to time. So I think the father needs to be, a strong role model, set a good example, and teach responsibility, and have fun with the kids, and be there for them.
Me being a probation officer and dealing with the young adults between 18 and 25 years old, I'll say 8 out of 10 of the young men that I deal with don't have a father in the household, and that's critical to their success. Not having that guidance and the balance of mother and father, and just having a man to show them how to be a man and not the streets or their uncles or somebody else who is not doing the right types of things can be detrimental to their success. So the father needs to be in place. The father needs to know his role and know how to guide that child in the right direction so they can be successful.
It's well documented. Everyone's heard stories about fathers and daughters and that special bond that they have. You know, I remember when Kelly was pregnant with our first child, Clark, and I found out I was having a boy. I felt I had won. That's it, game over. You know, we're good. You know, if we have another child, didn't matter, boy or girl, what have you. I had my son. I was good to go. And so when she was pregnant with our second child, we found out it was a daughter. It immediately rocked my world because I'm like, I don't know. I was happy, but at the same time, I didn't know what I was going to do with a little girl. And immediately, day one, this girl started pulling at my heart, just like this. She started doing little things, and it was almost like, I know it may seem silly, but it was almost like just the way that we would look at each other. I'm like, she's already wrapping me around her finger. And as time went on, I really started thinking about our relationship. I'm like, man, you know, I'm not just raising a little girl. She's going to be somebody's wife and mother one day. And that just added another layer of responsibility and weight to the situation because, you know, it's so easy to get caught up. They grow up, and it's so easy to get caught up in that, you know, where they are now. But when I started thinking about where she's going, it helped me so much. I remember, I don't even know if she was 1 year old yet. I kind of looked at Kelly and said, I'm not ready to walk her down the aisle yet. And Kelly kind of laughed and looked at me and like, babe, you know, you got a long time before that happens. But I recall looking at her father's face when he walked her down the aisle at our wedding. And the look that he had on his face wasn't anything bad. It was just kind of like, man, I'm giving my little girl away. And that's kind of how I started viewing my relationship with Logan. It's like, man, I have to be here for her. I have to kind of show her I'm her first male interaction. You know, she's going to gauge so much stuff when she gets older and starts dating. She's going to gauge so much stuff on how daddy, you know, was at home and different things like that. So if I take her out and, you know, we go to the movies and stuff, I have to show her the proper way to do this and what she should expect from people and from guys, you know. So when I realized that, it took things to another level with me and her. You know, I still love my boy, you know, Clark. That's my guy. You know, that's not changing. But specifically when it comes to the daughter, I don't think I can't imagine anything else that comes to that as far as parenting, especially a father and a daughter. I think that bond is just incredibly strong. And I'm looking so forward to walking this out with her and to being the male example that she needs in her life.
Well, for me, I want my kids to make sure they know how to take care of themselves and know how to be a survivor and be resourceful. The reason I say that is because this is a harsh world we live in. It's, again, you know, it's just the world that I know. I see or have seen a lot of bad things happen to people. And being naturally protective and having that protective instinct even more enhanced because of what I do for a living, I wanted to make sure my kids can protect themselves and carry themselves with confidence and assurance that they will be able to deal and learn from mistakes and learn from the harsh realities that may come. You know, I expect them to get hurt. I want them to be able to get up and not give up. I hope that they'll be able to, from me, that I'll be able to teach them not just taking care of themselves, but being responsible for their actions just as much. That they need to, you know, be very mindful with how they treat people. They got to be respectful. They got to have integrity, and they have to be able to learn from their mistakes and not be afraid to make mistakes. That's the biggest thing. I don't want them to be afraid to fail. It's going to be a huge balancing act, and that, I'm trying to teach myself that too, to balance failure and balance success and happiness all at the same time, because take the good with the bad, just like the old saying says, and I want them to be able to do that too.
Sometimes I don't think that people in general, but children are given a clear explanation of why it is that the things that they do can either harm or benefit others. So one thing I want to make clear to my children is do something like whatever it is you choose to do, make sure you do something that can benefit somebody else. Just learn to be a blessing to other people, even when other people might not be able to be a blessing to you in return. That return, as far as I'm concerned, that return will come from God, and He can choose however He wants to direct that back to you.
I want to teach her the content of character. Is the most important, I think, for her to understand, and how important it is for her to be true to herself, how it's important it is for her to respect herself and respect others. I want to teach her to always strive for great things and never accept second place. But if you don't, you have some humility when you don't reach where you want to go. You keep trying, but you don't think of yourself as being better than anyone else. These are some of the just characteristics I would like to teach Sydney.
In 2009, I think it was, I went to a workshop in Tuscany, Italy with a group of great photographers. And we were there for about 5 or 6 days. And Bob Davis was one of the attendees of the workshop. Bob's a great guy, incredible photographer, a long career. He's done some really great things. And, I remember one night at dinner, and I didn't know his story, his parenting story. One night at dinner, he takes out his phone and he starts showing us an adoption video that he and Dawn had done from when they adopted their children. And I was shocked. One, I didn't know, and two, I had never really seen anything like this before. And I never forget, this was back in 2009. I was thinking to myself, wow, this guy can take children that aren't biologically his and raise them as though they are biologically his. That, to me, I already had a tremendous amount of respect for Bob and his professional work. But as a man, as a father, it went to a greater level with this, because I just think that is something that you don't see every day. You see adoptions, but to the level that they took it to, and the way that their heart and minds were bent toward their children was incredible. I tell people, I don't even know if I've shared this with Bob, but the funny thing is I've watched, online and different things, watch his kids grow, and I'm like, how do you adopt children and they end up looking just like you? But I mean, to me, that's just how much that they love each other, man. So I was really happy that Bob was involved with this project, and I knew that from sharing his perspective on adopting, and more so developing as an adopting parent, developing the mind of a biological parent, I knew it would be invaluable for this project, and I'm so happy that he chose to be a part of it.
When Dawn and I were planning a family, she always knew she wanted to adopt ever since she was a young girl. I, on the other hand, did not. I was like, I got to have my own kids. It's got to come from me, because I was being really, really honest. I didn't know if I could fall in love with just some kid, right? So what really turned the corner for me was my neighbor, and he's got 2 kids of his own, and we were sitting around talking, and I was just laying it on to him. I'm like, I'm open to this adoption idea, but I really don't know if I could just love just some strange kid. I really don't know it. And what gave me a lot of perspective was, he said, you know what? We're not like women. Women just fall in love with kids. They're nurturing by nature. And he said, even with my own kids, I fell in love with them. I didn't immediately love them when they came out. I couldn't really interact with them. They're kind of little blobs, and men were different that way. And I said to myself, I could get my mind around that. I can fall in love with them. So that stretch wasn't far for me to go. And it's true. And the minute we received our referral photographs, God planted that seed in my heart, and I immediately knew those were our kids. That's what was meant to be. And then when you meet them in person, you just fall in love with them. And it wasn't as an immediate thing, but it did happen very rapidly. And now to this day, it's been 12, 13 years. I couldn't imagine loving them any differently or any more as if they were our own biological children. And in many ways, I think maybe you do love them more because you really worked to bring children into your life. It wasn't something that just happened. You know, it was a conscious decision. It was a process. There is a birthing process with adoption as well as having your own children. And that birthing process gives you that time too to get your mind used to having a child in your life. And as I said, you can fall in love with them and then they're your own. They're in your heart.
You know, a lot of times as parents, we get caught up in the day-to-day grind with things, and you know, sometimes we can be a little short patient with our children. I know I have in the past. I'm guilty of it. And you know, again, and sitting down and kind of figuring out the fathers that I wanted to be involved with this, I thought about the special needs angle and the fathers that have special needs children. So when I spoke with Greg and Lorenzo, and they both were willing to not only be a part of this project, but to sit down and we kind of kick it across the table from each other and just, you know, chat about different things. And, you know, this was definitely a conversation where I was listening, because to hear the level of love, effort, and care that it goes into raising a child with special needs totally blew me away. The unique thing about Greg and Lorenzo is they both have 2 boys. They each have one son with special needs, and they each have a son without special needs. So hearing the dynamic and how they manage that, and we even started talking about how having a special needs child, how it can affect your marriage. You know, we shared all that, and I think for parents that may have a special needs child or have been told that they're going to have a special needs child, or for parents that just want to be better parents, this conversation definitely will change your perspective. It'll help you. And I think it'll definitely, for dads, it'll definitely take you to the next level in fatherhood. You said you both have children or a son with special needs. How, when you found out, I'm not sure exactly the moments that you all found out, where at in the pregnancies or post-pregnancy that you guys found out, how did it shape you, or how did it affect you as a dad, not only as a dad, but having a son that you knew was going to be like, okay, this is going to be different. I didn't expect this. So how did y'all can field it out?
Well, I'll let Greg go first. He's got the easy one.
Oh, wow.
The reason why I say that, because I'm Greg's godfather, his first son, his sons. So I'm not going to tell a story.
Wow. Well, for myself and my wife, I don't think we really had time to try and figure anything out, because we found out that there were going to be challenges with him after he was born. Mm-hmm. So the 9 months leading up to his birth, everything appeared to be normal. You know, all of the doctor's visits, we went, took care of those, came home, you know, had the opportunity to, you know, prepare the nest, get in his room, and, you know, the cribs, all of the normal things that you think that you're going to go through as a new father. And the day that my son was born, I recall being in the room, and all of a sudden, all I remember was they pulled my son out, and there was like a crowd of nurses and attendant physicians and things that kind of gathered around him. And I'm kind of with my wife. She'd had a C-section, so they allowed me to be in there. And so I'm talking with her, you know, letting her know, hey, everything, you know, seems to be okay. And then when there was like a commotion on the other side of the OR, I think I remember her saying, you know, how does it look like? How's everything going? And at that point, I still hadn't seen him, you know, after they had cleaned him off. And then I was kind of alerted that there may be some issues with his breathing and, you know, some other things that were kind of going on. And so we really didn't have time to, you know, anticipate, well, we're going to do this or we're going to do this. It just kind of all seemed to happen
at that one time.
And like I said, we had no idea that he was going to have any challenges. It was, hey, we're having our first son, and whoa, there's something going on here. And before long, next thing I knew, they had kind of carted my son up and they rushed him off to Children's Hospital. And it was, I'd say a pretty stressful 3 days, because my wife was still at Southern Maryland and my newborn son, firstborn, was at Children's. So I spent the first 3 days of his life traveling back and forth between 2 hospitals, checking on my wife and then making sure that the care that my son was receiving, was adequate, and that I could try and find out as much information, because we didn't have a diagnosis. They couldn't tell us anything. So it's one thing when you can have something that you can attack with your faith, but if the doctors aren't giving you anything, or they're saying we're still trying to figure it out, it kind of leaves you in a position where, okay, what are we going to do? We don't, it was just a really, really interesting time. And as time went on, the doctors still never were really able to give us a quote unquote diagnosis that was specific to him. They said, well, it's kind of fits in this syndrome, but it wasn't really specific. So at that point, kind of got with my wife, and our mindset was, okay, well, if the doctors don't know what's going on, we know God knows. And at that point, we can use our faith and we'll just direct what we want for our son. And since they couldn't give us anything, well, if that's the case, then this is giving us the opportunity to make the future that we want for him and for ourselves.
Right. Well, I mean, that's interesting. I mean, I know when I have a son and a daughter, and when my son was born, we didn't even know at the time my wife was pregnant early on, and she had been working out, getting in shape, and I'm looking at her, and she's like, hey, she went in the bathroom one day and saw a lot of blood. What's going on? So she goes, gets checked out. They said, oh, you're pregnant. Man, you're having a miscarriage. At the same time. So I'm sitting here like, I know exactly, because I don't know how to process that. I'm like, I don't know, like, what emotion am I supposed to use right now? Like, so they go in, do the DNC, do the procedure. And I'm like, man, still kind of like, okay, babe, we didn't know. We didn't have time to get really happy because we didn't know. And so that happened. She's resting. So, she's working out. I'm looking at her. I'm like, okay. So one day we're in the bathroom, brushing our teeth. I'm looking at her. Body is just, everything's getting smaller, but her stomach. I'm like, I think we should go get checked. And so she said, no, I'm okay. I'm like, do a pregnancy test. And so she does a pregnancy test, and she's pregnant, still pregnant. What happened was she was pregnant with twins.
Wow.
She miscarried one of them. Mm-hmm. They could not explain why after the procedure, how Clark wasn't, they're like, we don't know how that happened. Now, I know how it happened.
Right.
But I look at him like, okay, we got to figure out what your purpose is.
Right.
Because
you're here for a reason.
You went through a lot to get here. Mm-hmm. What about you?
Oh, wow. How did I find out when my son was having, that I knew he was going to do special needs?
Yeah. Like how did it affect you when you found out?
Well, I mean, we went through normal pregnancy, found out we were having twins. My wife was older, those anybody over 35, they have to get checked every 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. So, everything, we're going every 2 weeks to the doctor. We're getting pictures taken of the kids. Everything's great. Born, everything's great. 2 healthy boys, and no need to go to NICU, both of them above 5 pounds. So now we're, a year, in, 12 months, and I got 2 twin boys, and one of them is, developing and talking and doing the normal things, and one is not. And that began to raise some flags with us. So we just began to, like anybody would who is a believer and loves the Lord, just know and believe that, that God has healing. It's part of our package as a believer, and that we know that he's going to be whole. So even though at the time we didn't know exactly what was going on, and part of this is, and I think it's important to say this, is that a lot of kids have issues and their parents just ignore them and say, they're going to be all right. They're going to be all right. They're going to be all right. That's a mistake. You know what I mean? And the reason why I say that is because although that right now my son's been diagnosed with autism, that's the doctor's diagnosis. That doesn't mean that I don't go get him additional services and make sure that he has everything that he needs to grow and develop. But I don't ignore that those challenges are there. But I still know and believe that that is a diagnosis. The doctor's diagnosis. The truth of the matter, right, being because of my belief system, is that he's whole and healed. So that's my perspective. That's how I operate. Now, it's, you think, it took us so long to have kids, me and my wife, and we went through a whole bunch of challenges with that. So here I am with 2 boys, one with a challenge that we've waited, so long to have, children my wife wanted. And, it will make you think about this whole, about the whole responsibility of it all, Okay, so now what is this? At the time, I'm thinking, so what does this really mean? Am I going to have to take care of him? How long? Till we know, till this healing is manifested. What are the challenges? What's the financial responsibility? How much time does it take? And every kid with these challenges, it's like somebody's foot. It's just like a shoe. Everything's a custom, tailor-made thing. Right. There's no one size fits all treatment or things that work with kids. So you have to come and kind of tailor-make your approach to how your kid's going to develop. So my boys are 4 now. So now I have one kid who is just like sharp as a tack, not that the other one's not sharp, but he's just very outgoing, very talkative, huge vocabulary, engaged people, and he's 4 years. And I have one son that, when he chooses to, we'll talk, At 18 months, we're out in front of Ruby Tuesdays. He hadn't said a word now. We haven't heard any words. So we're leaving out, and a bunch of people stop us like they always do with twins. And he just says, bye-bye. Bye-bye. Waves bye-bye. And I was just like, dude, are you serious? Because you don't know at the time, between 12 and 18 months, I'm thinking, okay, does he have a hearing problem? Maybe he's deaf. Maybe it's this, maybe it's that. You go get an MRI, you check to see whether there's something in his head that you don't know, and you don't know anything. You're just kind of figuring it out. And on the initial, nobody can really tell you, especially when they're very young. It's only now that we had some, we started to go down that road that we began to find out on what's actually, because you look at my 2 sons, they look like 2 normal. There's no, there's no like Down syndrome or Asperger's or any facial features that would clue you into that he's special needs. He looks like any other kid. But one of my sons, he needs a lot of attention. It's difficult getting babysitter because my son is very active. He needs attention. So how did all of that make me feel? It made me feel I guess initially it was, man, I really got to take care of the 3 of these people. It's my job. And not only is it my job just got a little harder.
Right.
It got a little harder. My job just got a little harder. And I'm going to have to do some extraordinary things because I have an extraordinary set of circumstances. And initially, you ask, man, why does this have to happen to me? You know what I mean? But, it happened because it's been placed upon me because I'm able to handle what's happened. And Bryce is here for a reason. I do not know what that is. Mm-hmm. In the midst of that, or in the meantime, while I'm figuring that out, I'm going to be the best caretaker, father, provider that I can be for him.
Question. Was your marriage affected? When you found out?
Oh, absolutely.
How did it affect your marriage? Like, positive or negative?
I'll let you start on this.
I would think.
He's tossed.
No, I would really. I would have to say, like, having a special needs child present its own set of challenges. It presents a new set of challenges. I mean, just having Greg's here is funny. It's like I have my challenges with my child, just from everyday care. Like, for instance, you know how you got 2 kids, you may stop and want to go to the grocery store or CVS or, and I can't walk down the aisle with my son because he will get into everything in the whole store. I have to be physically holding his hand. So do I want to work this hard to make a stop? Simple little thing.
Gotcha.
Like, do I really want that? It's going to take some extra things. Right. Yeah, I'll put him in the cart. Yeah, I could put him in the cart. Then the other one going to want to get in the cart. So I'm going to push 2 carts. You know what I mean?
I got you.
Or when they're small, I mean, even when they were small, how do you go into, I mean, I had a double stroller and a double, you can't even fit the double stroller through some doors. That's just a whole twin thing, not even special needs. But how did it affect my marriage? I mean, it became a large challenge. It's still a challenge. Mm-hmm. Finding time to meet each other's needs while you are doing everything to meet the needs of your children and then your child and then the child with special needs is it's a big challenge, man, and it's a challenge every day. Mm-hmm. It doesn't go away. Me personally, just not even on a biblical, I'm going to toss all that out. I mean, I like my wife enough to do that, all of that work, to stick it out. She's worth it. I can't, now everybody might not be able to say that about their spouse, you know what I mean? My spouse is, you know what I mean? I felt that way. Greg knows. I felt that way from before. I was like, man, this girl right here. Wow. I got a winner, this one. So she's somebody that I'm willing to put in the work to go through the
so
part
you feel she's in this aspect as far as parenthood, this your partner.
Oh yeah.
Has it helped shape the definition of partnership a little bit more?
Oh, absolutely. Because with the division of labor, I mean, you got to divide the labor up between for your child, whatever their needs might be. Greg's situation is a lot more labor intensive than mine, but even so, we have to divide up. Okay, who does what?
Right.
And let's divide up to make sure, okay, you get him ready for bed, you bathe him. My son can't put on his own clothes. He's 4 years old. I got another one, his twin brother. He puts on his clothes out, lay the clothes out. He gets himself ready. I got to get him up. I got to get him dressed. My wife usually feeds him. She takes him to school. I pick him up. She feeds him. I, get him ready for bed. I bathe him. I put his clothes on. Whatever else that needs to happen in between there. Boom. And then we just have like a routine. And even, on the weekends, man, there was a time where I used to look forward to weekends when I worked 9 to 5. Because that was like the time off and the respite. But with a special needs child, you work harder on the weekend than you do because you don't have, they're at daycare or they're at school, and somebody else is doing that day-to-day grind, feeding, changing, whatever needs to happen. Developmental, whatever programs you're working on, whatever, developmental things that they're doing, all that's being taken care of during the day. So you're good, but that responsibility gets shifted to Saturday and to Sunday. So it's a different, and it can challenge you, especially if you're somebody who feels like their needs are more important than their child's needs.
When I decided to do this documentary project, I knew that I already had pretty much the fathers in mind that I wanted to sit down with, but there was one in particular that I really, really wanted to be a part of this project, simply because for the last 15 to 16 years, I've been able to see so much consistency in his life, especially as it pertains to fatherhood. So when I reached out to my pastor, Dr. Michael Freeman, and I told him about the project, he didn't hesitate. He said he would definitely be a part of it, and we just needed to work out the logistics of scheduling. So it worked out. We were able to sit down, have a one-on-one, and just chatted about fatherhood. I kind of shared some things from my life with him, and I think one of the most impactful things that he shared was the aspect on how fathers who aren't in their child's life, the importance of being in your child's life, and how to do it. Because things happen. This is life. Nobody's perfect, but it's about the decisions that you make going forward. So I think this interview that I had with Dr. Michael Freeman definitely will be one of those building blocks to help us become better fathers. Dr. Freeman, thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with me. A little bit about this project. We've entitled this project The Missing Anchor. It's my belief that the father is the anchor of the home. I've kind of equated it to a ship or boat, if you will. When that ship's out at sea, it's moving about, but when it comes time, if it can't pull into port, it needs to stop. If you don't have an anchor to drop to hold it in that position, there's no telling what's going to happen with that ship. It's going to drift. It's not going to stay on its course. So
absolutely, I
wanted to do this project in hopes of inspiring other fathers out there who may be wayward fathers or fathers that are new fathers trying to get on the right path. And I've looked at you, sir, I've been in the ministry now, I think it's been a little over 15 years.
Wow.
And I've had the privilege of not only seeing you from the pulpit on Sundays, but in the photo shoots and different things to see the consistency in how you are outside of the pulpit. So I really wanted to sit down with you to get your perspective on fatherhood. And I think a good place to start would be kind of describe the relationship that you had with your dad growing up in your household with your brothers and sisters. Like how was that relationship between you two particularly?
That's quite interesting place to start, because to equate what I have had with my father and what I have with my children, it appears to be worlds apart. The relationship, the concept of the relationship was presented in an entirely different manner. I mean, it was basically whatever he said, that's what went on.
Right.
So, to even describe a relationship, I don't know, if you will, the relationship of a father and son from that particular relationship.
Right.
I mean, he is my father, and I am his son. but the relationship as I know it today, and what was the original intent of the Heavenly Father,
Right.
it really wasn't conveyed to the degree I'm sure he would have been pleased with what he knows today.
So would you say that, I guess, life experiences with your 3 children has, you use that maybe as a foundation, but you had to define it how you saw fit for your household? Would that be the best way? Because I know that you mentioned the relationship that the Heavenly Father had as it relates to the family.
Absolutely.
And the father.
Absolutely.
So in hearing what you were saying, would that be more so of you shaping that for your family, for yourself?
Yeah. See, I've derived and have arrived to the place of what I have projected to my children from God's perspective.
Okay.
People can get their definition of anything from anywhere,
Right.
but the one who defined father and son relationship is the one that we most should look towards to carry out that particular relationship.
Right.
You know, I've said this for years, that the power to define is the power to fulfill.
Right.
So there's not a father alive who has to look for the definition of father when all he has to do is refer to God. So opposed to referring to my life experiences with my dad, I kind of jumped that relationship to go back to the original intent. What did God have in mind as the father of all fathers from the very beginning concerning this relationship? So, for instance, God sees the father and son relationship as well as friends. I was never my father's friend.
Right.
And fathers somehow have developed the mindset that you can't be your children's friend. But yet we get in church and we sing, I am a friend of God.
Right.
You follow what I'm
Yes,
saying?
I do.
And so I've allowed my children to reflect the relationship that the Father God wanted me to reflect, the relationship with him.
Something interesting that you've been teaching lately in your messages, I know it's helped me out, has related to the approach to children. You know, I think this past Sunday you mentioned, hey, if your kid comes home with an F, take him out for ice cream. You know, and I know that's contradictory to what a lot of parents would think.
And we come home with an F.
Right, it's nah. Don't even think about it.
Don't think about ice cream.
Right, but I mean, it's those nuggets alone have helped me, even because my children are young, and I've spoken with other fathers, and I said, if my viewpoint is this, if I have to lead and guide my children based on my own knowledge, then I'm going to miss the mark.
Oh, absolutely.
So I have purpose. Everyone that is involved with this documentary is handpicked.
Okay.
Because it's something that I've observed.
Okay.
You know, and that I can say, okay, I can glean from this person. I can learn a
Okay,
little
great.
bit here and there. So even with my children now being 2 and about to be 5, you know, when things happen,
Wow, they're growing up
I look at, you know, I hear and remember those things that you said, and I kind of look like, okay, what's the best approach here? You know, and I think that's where a lot of fathers, because fathers have been absent for so long, and you can look at the generations and see, you know, well, if you're doing this now, you know, start tracing back in the generations and see what happened. My particular story is, and I didn't find this out till I was 24. You know, my mom remarried when I was 5.
Okay.
And we moved overseas. We're there for 4 years. And when we came home, 6 months later, my stepfather was gone.
Oh,
you know?
wow.
And I'm like, I didn't know what was going on.
Right.
You know, and I tell people it's about the memories that you create, because all I knew is he was gone now, but I remembered us building bikes and different things like that. So
Yeah.
I look at the situation and wonder, okay, how can we prevent that from happening? How can I make sure that I'm in my child's life no matter what's going on? Of course, the relationship with my wife is great, but my relationship with my children is something that I look at as, okay, you got to know me as daddy.
Absolutely.
And like you said, I don't want to just be the disciplinarian. I don't want it because I want my kids to have fun with me.
Absolutely.
And I'm watching my daughter develop now, and she's detaching from mommy a little bit, and she's starting to become daddy's little girl. So I also look at, and how did, with 2 girls and a boy, how was that dynamic when you have 3 children, that you have your son, but then you have 2 daughters, and they're taking not different paths, but they all have their different interests. Was it challenging for you to understand the dynamics of each one in particularly, or?
A good challenge.
Okay.
And it's always a challenge. Discovering differences is a great challenge. It's a great opportunity to have revealed to you what was in the mind of God from the very beginning concerning your children, because they are not just children for us. They are assignments handpicked by God, given to us as the development of what He had in mind. So if anybody wanted to really know, how to really be a good father, okay, first of all, go to God. So with every last one of them, and I wish I would have known all that I know today, because they probably, Brittany and Breland would probably have different names. Even with the development and the construction of their assignments in life, starting from their names would have been different. I would have really sought God a lot more concerning their names, because whatever I called them would have pointed them towards the destination of their particular assignment.
Gotcha.
A rose by any other name is still a rose, but to be specific in everything that I wanted to do with regards to the development of these assignments, it would have been so much more appropriate for every time when they heard their name, they also heard their assignment, their purpose. You follow what I'm saying?
Yes.
But in uncovering and unveiling their purpose and the challenge of it, it was really exciting. It gave me an opportunity to explore some options that I never had an opportunity to explore with my father. I don't think my father was interested in really knowing us. He was just interested in growing us, developing us, getting us in a position that we would not be menaced to society, but that we would be citizens that would make some kind or type of contribution that would be positive opposed to negative. You better not do this, you better not do that, don't go to jail, those kind of things. But with my generation and my children, it's like I really wanted to know them. The philosophy of my father's generation and my generation, my father generation would tell you, if you play with a dog, they're going to lick you in the face. That kind of thing. First of all, I'm not a dog. And then secondly, I'm not interested in licking you in your face. But the mindset and the progression of the generation is so overwhelmingly interesting to me, because what my father happened to be and what I am, it shows, and please I don't want anyone to hear that my father was not a good father.
Oh, of course.
That my father, he just did what he knew.
Right.
And you can only do what you know.
Right.
And he did a pretty good job, because all of his children are doing quite well in life.
Right.
But if he could have added what I know to our upbringing, man, and what I'm doing for my children, and discovering, first of all, who they are. And we are still today the bestest of friends. My youngest is 21 years old. And every single day, when I see every last one of them, I'm kissing and hugging all of them. I mean, even down to Joshua with his big old burly. But at this particular point, I have almost discovered, and I could help any father to be a better father with what I know.
I think when I was sharing with you what had happened to me previously, the other part to that story was, which I would say your example has helped me so much, is that at 24, I found out that the guy that was my godfather was my father.
Wow, isn't that something?
You know,
Yeah.
And by the time that I really got this information, he had passed.
Wow.
So I felt a huge disconnect.
Yeah.
Entering manhood, like,
yeah.
because even in your situation with your dad, you redefined it as you saw based on the Bible.
Absolutely.
But it goes back to that anchor piece. It's like I didn't have anything to pull from, because it's almost like, you hear people say, good and bad, you're just like your dad.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't know.
Right.
So now I'm kind of like figuring this out, the whole,
Wow.
I never felt like my identity was lost.
Right.
But I knew from a relationship standpoint, and even with children, hey, I need to make sure that I get this right, because what had happened just in my situation has been going on in my family.
Wow.
So I can almost go like this and it's just rampant everywhere. So
Right.
I knew that it had to stop.
It
has to stop with me. And that has redefined even my relationship, because I'm like, okay, well, my dad wasn't here. So how can I make sure that my kids always come to me? Because I look at how your children come to you, even at the age that they are. And that's something that, at 18, I don't want that to stop.
Yeah,
Just
absolutely.
because they may move on and do what they want to do.
Get married, have children, all
right.
that.
I mean, the family's growing
Right.
at that point. I still want them, and I've been blessed because Kelly's family is like that. Her mom and dad are together, and I look at the closeness that they have.
I love it.
And he's been central to, I've been able to watch him from afar. He's a man's man. He takes care of the home and everything. So I think the question I would like to get your input on is for fathers that are wayward. They are out of their children's lives, and a lot of times that's because of a broken relationship with the mother. What advice do you have for the fathers that need to get, because it's the children first, what advice or insight would you have for them to possibly get back on track in their child's life and to help the development of their children?
Well, firstly, I would like for them to know they are missing out on some of the greatest moments that they could ever have in their entire existence. I cannot overemphasize how much they are depriving themselves from a joy that God intended for them to experience. Not to mention, you're robbing the child of so many different other integral values that even you didn't have an opportunity, because your father was supposed to give you the guide or the barometer. He was supposed to give you the roadmap. He was supposed to reveal to you the identity of not only himself, but his life being used to reveal the identity of God. We see the devastations in our society from that wayward father.
Right.
Every statistic known to man would prove that the absence of the father is a tremendous detriment for the child in their development, in their academics and their social skills, all different kinds of areas of development is really depriving this child.
Right.
So if that father is wayward, and it wouldn't really matter to me if the child is 40 or 50 years old. I would work my way somehow back into that child's life, regardless of their age, because there's something innately lacking in an individual, even at your age, that the father was supposed to provide.
I agree.
Now, thank God you've been able to look to other men like myself, your father-in-law. You've been able to identify men who have added to or provided for that area that your father did not provide. Not every young man gets that opportunity.
Right.
long before he discovers what he should be, he's already blown it. And then he gets into a situation where it's difficult to receive from a man. Right. So to really just be specific in answering your question, if that father, and I don't know how much I can pour out my heart to whomever is viewing this docu, of the importance of them getting back in place and going after their child regardless of the conditions and circumstances that has caused them to be wayward or separate from one another. Because just like the Heavenly Father, he will always come running after us. And Malachi mentions the season and the hour where the hearts of the fathers are turned back to the sons and the hearts of the sons are returned back to the father. And that season is perpetual. When that man gets a revelation or hears something like this docu, that's the season where he needs to go back and make amends of that area.
And I think on that note, that's the perfect place to end this.
I love it.
I mean, I just want to thank you for your time. This has been something I wanted to do for a while, and the time just perfect. So,
I love it.
Thank you.
My
Thank
pleasure.
you so much.
I love
really
you. You're doing a
appreciate
great
it.
job.
Thank you so much, sir.
Man.
All right.
My advice to any parent, whether it's a mother or a father, is have patience. Be consistent. Have guidelines. Consistency. Children love consistency. They love boundaries, so they know where they are. They may push those boundaries on you, but be patient. Be consistent. And most of all, be loving and be open to them.
You have to be a father, have humility. You got to be selfless. You can't think of it about just being you. You have to take the approach and have the realization that the things that you do will be impressed upon your child. And then also, on the selfish side of things, the reward of being a father is immense. And you can only experience it if you do it. It may look like a lot of hard work, and it is, but at the end of the day, the reward is unmeasurable.
The father has to accept the fact that there was that both the father and the child have to accept the fact that there's a big gap. There was a disconnect. And that they need to get past that part. They need to talk that out. Hey, you weren't around. Well, I'm sorry, this is why. Not that as an excuse, but there's reasons things happen, and the child needs to also take part in being a good listener too. Understand what the reasons were. Maybe the father traveled too much or was, away for whatever reason it may be. But the father also needs to forgive the child for being angry at them, while the child forgives the father for being gone or being off the path, so to speak, whatever it may be, being absent, losing their way. I think it comes down to both parties, the child and the father, is the big word, the big F word, forgiveness. Without that, you can't get to the next step. You have to close the book on the past, forgive, understand, and rebuild. And build on what you can, start fresh. And if you can't stop living in the past, you won't be able to, bridge the gap to move on to the future, to the next step. So they got to find that medium, that happy ground of forgiveness with each other. That's what they need to do.